I've been having a lot of conversations about leaving the evangelical Christian church, deconstruction from religion, political orientation, and just generally how we can all work together to build a brighter future for human society. And these are all really important conversations to me, and I've been grateful for those of you who've contributed and given me feedback. I do want to address something that's a little bit controversial here, and that's essentially how radical I am. My social media profile bios all label me as an atheist leftist. And this is intentional for many reasons, as much as I do push back against the idea of labels in general. One, it's accurate. Even though I consider myself very spiritual and contemplative, even though I find a lot of wisdom in mythic traditions, I fuck with chakras, you know? I'm still technically an atheist because I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest that there's anything supernatural going on in the universe, which I'm happy to get into another time. I'm also technically an anti-capitalist, so again, calling myself a leftist is accurate. Another reason I'm actively calling myself an atheist leftist is to attract like-minded people. And this doesn't necessarily describe everyone who resonates with my messages and content, but it does give people a general idea about what they can expect when they tune into my platforms. But I do try my best not to use exclusionary language, so I know there are some religious people who are left-leaning and some atheists who are more conservative tuning into my content and live streams. And finally, the last reason I call myself an atheist leftist is perhaps the most important one. I am here to resist the religious right in the United States. I think that both religion and politics have coalesced into an inseparable ideology that is aligning itself with an authoritarian fascist regime, which has happened time and time again throughout history. We've seen this level of control escalate through the manufactured culture war between the masses, half of which are convinced that some spiritual warfare is going on and they need to protect their children from anyone who looks or acts differently from them. And the other half is just trying to either A, survive, or B, resist. And I don't think religion belongs in politics, but unfortunately, in this current political landscape, the conversations are not separate, okay? And because of the atrocities being committed in our country's name, because of the increasing danger for marginalized communities to simply exist, and because of the privilege afforded to me to be able to do something about all of this, I will no longer be chill about growing up indoctrinated as a conservative Christian. Because my upbringing was intense, and I know I'm not alone in that. It took me years to see through the cult-like environment that was attempting to control my every move and my every thought. And I get a lot of comments about how I've escaped one cult just to join another, basically referencing the fact that because I call myself an atheist leftist, I just joined another extreme and still don't think for myself. But here's the problem with that. I actually am intentionally choosing an extreme. You're right. I could have been fine just never worrying about politics again. I could have been just fine living a life that was spiritual, not religious, without needing the hard-lined label of an atheist. In fact, I was totally prepared to just live my simple life and never worry about politics or religion ever again. I was this close to choosing to stay apolitical and totally neutral in all of these conversations for the rest of my life. But then Donald Trump got elected again. How are we back here? And I realized that avoiding these difficult conversations was actually another privilege I could afford as a middle-class white woman in the United States. The reality, though, is that if I don't speak up, that's one less voice standing in between those who would exploit and harm people to get ahead and, well, everyone else. So I recognize that I'm radicalized, but it's not brainwashing. It's deliberate. And here's why. The dominating ideology in this country is Christian conservatism. That's not to say Christian conservatism describes the majority of people, but just that it has the most power. That means they have representatives all the way in the top of the White House and behind the scenes pulling the strings of how this country is run, who has power, and who doesn't. And the thing about authoritarianism is that it doesn't inherently require a specific ideology to function. What it needs is any ideology, okay? I have been asked how I would feel about an atheist version of authoritarianism in this country, and my response is largely the same, okay? The same as it is now. While it's technically true, I don't adhere to theism or a belief in God, I would still find a way to stand up to the regime and speak truth to power. I would still demand that everyone, including religious people who I disagree with, is afforded the same dignity as everyone else. That is who I've always been. And I'm going to tell you a true story to illustrate this. I remember being in my Bible-based, evangelical, fundamentalist Christian middle school. I believe it was 7th grade. We had a teacher who, one day, reprimanded one of my classmates because she was writing in her notebook while she was supposed to be paying attention and responding to the math questions the rest of the class was participating in. As a result, our teacher confiscated said notebook from her. Instead of leaving it at that, though, our teacher crossed a line. She started reading the notebook out loud as a punishment. Turns out that notebook was my classmate's version of a journal or diary. And while the content wasn't incredibly sensitive information, it was still personal and therefore embarrassing. My classmate started crying, understandably, and our teacher scoffed. She couldn't believe my classmate was being so emotional. And for a moment, there was just an awkward silence as the rest of us processed what had happened. But out of the 20 students in that classroom watching our teacher bully someone, I was one of only 2 people who spoke up, me and one other girl. And neither of us were really close friends with this other classmate. In fact, the girl whose notebook was confiscated was one of the popular cheerleader types who at the time had pretty much nothing to do with a book nerd like me. But I raised my hand, and without waiting for permission to speak, I said, "I don't think you should be reading that notebook to us. It's not your business." Because that is who I've always been. I will always stand up to bullies. Later on, the incident was reported to the school administration, and that teacher had to apologize to the class as a whole. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I was still a diehard Christian. I believed the same things as everyone else in that room that day. Because the reality is, what I maintain is, I don't care what you believe. Don't be a bully, or I will call you out. The United States government built this country on the basis of being a bully. And I will admit that after deconstructing from the indoctrination of my childhood, it's taken me a long time to come to terms with just how much of a bully we are and have been, both to the rest of the world and to marginalized community members right here at home. And under the Trump administration, we are seeing the nature of a bully take shape in full form. And it hasn't even been 100 days since he took office. Right now, as it stands, Christian conservatism, as a movement, as an ideology, is functioning as the arm of an authoritarian regime that is at its core a bully to everyone outside of Christian conservatism, for now. Because as we've seen time and time again throughout history, eventually the authoritarianism will also come for the adherents of the ideology it claims to promote. In time, we will look back at this time period in history and wonder, how could we let this happen? My role, as this continues to unfold, is to speak truth about the indoctrination of Christian conservatism as an arm of imperialism. I have firsthand experience in that environment, and I know what it takes to walk away from those thought systems. I have studied and educated myself on the ways in which this country and organized religion is failing us. And I continue to learn about those things. But at the end of the day, I am not going to be chill. I will not pretend that neutrality is an option. I will not pretend to be close to center on a lot of political topics because I'm not. I was indoctrinated from birth into the far, far right. I was shaped to be an extremist. I was expected to hold to my values no matter what. And joke's on them, because I will be doing so, just like I've always done so. I will continue standing up to bullies, no matter how radical that makes me or how extreme you think I am. And frankly, a woman with educated opinions of her own appears to be radical to many, many people in its own right. It is time to stop being chill. I have a lot to share, and I will share it freely. Thank you so much.